What's up, everybody? If you want to join the greatest online Star Wars community, the Fandom Menace, make sure you hit that subscribe button before today's video starts, so you don't miss out on any updates and you're always the first to know when our newest videos go live.
The following is a world-class Bullshitters exclusive.
They say you remember exactly where you were when a major event happened. When Kennedy was shot, the moon landing, when we found out who shot Mr. Burns, or JR if you're old enough. But for me, I will always remember where I was when it was announced that Disney bought Star Wars. I was in college. It was Dr. Newworth's class, and a friend of mine turned around to tell me that Disney had bought Star Wars and that new movies were coming out. I thought to myself, no way, that couldn't happen. And then I thought about it. The Avengers had just come out a few months earlier, and I loved that movie. So then I thought to myself, well, Han Solo's gonna die, because we know he hates the role. Then I thought, no matter what, it has to be better than the prequels. Disney's making some decent stuff with Marvel. Boy, was I wrong. Instead of trying to convey my crushing disappointment, let's hear me on that fateful night back in 2015.
So we just got out of the new Star Wars movie, and I am emotionally gutted. There wasn't one positive thing I could say about this film. This is without a doubt the worst Star Wars film. Yeah, I just think the movie lacks any kind of Star Wars feel. I don't even know how people are saying it's going to cash in on nostalgia. What part of Star Wars did it get right? None. I mean, I've been watching these movies for 20 fucking years. I'm not some flash in the pan, oh my god, it's the biggest event of the year, I gotta be a part of it, douchebag fan. I've liked this shit when it wasn't cool, when it was cool. I lived through the prequels, and I kinda missed the prequel eras. At least those movies had an original story to tell. This movie was fucking episodes 4, 5, and 6 rolled into one. There was nothing original about this story. They basically took Tatooine and Hoth and Endor and rolled them up into a ball and gave you a Death Star and a trench run and some X-Wings versus TIE Fighters in space, and that was about it. I've never really been like, oh, I got to meet George Lucas and tell him what a big fan I am. But if I ever did get a chance to like speak to him just for a couple minutes, I'd be like, man, I miss when you had control of that shit. At least, like, George Lucas was cool because he was his own corporation, but he wasn't a corporate-owned entity. Disney is a corporate entity. It does everything a certain way. Lucasfilm was its own, its own thing. It was cool. It was so big based on one fucking franchise.
Yeah.
But it still did business a different way, and that touch is gone. Rest in peace, Star Wars.
Well, 2015, Jeff, it looks like you were right, and you weren't alone in your criticisms. George Lucas, aka the creator of Star Wars, has the same complaints, and Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, is bringing these concerns to light. Now, before we get any further, is it just me, or does this seem like the worst possible time to release this publicly? I mean, I know the dude's trying to sell books and make money, but this is the build-up to The Rise of Skywalker, Episode 9, the final Star Wars film in the Skywalker saga. Ugh, I still hate that tagline. I mean, you killed off Luke, so can you stop milking his name and let him rest in peace? Thank you. Anyway, releasing this when there's already such fan division seems stupid at best. Disney and Lucasfilm must be really dumb to allow this to happen. Admittedly, it's not the dumbest thing that's come from Star Wars. But this is probably the most poorly timed. Disney CEO says Star Wars creator George Lucas felt upset and betrayed when he told sequel trilogy wouldn't follow his plots. In Disney CEO Bob Iger's memoir, The Ride of a Lifetime, Lessons Learned from 15 Years as CEO of the Walt Disney Company, released Monday, Iger reflects on Star Wars creator George Lucas's feeling upset and betrayed upon realizing Disney intended to go in another direction and forego using his plots for the sequel trilogy following the company's 2012 acquisition of Lucasfilm. At some point in the process, George told me that he had completed outlines for 3 new movies. He agreed to send us 3 copies of the outlines, one for me, one for Alan Braverman, and one for Alan Horn, who'd just been hired to run our studio, Iger recounts. Alan Horn and I read George's outlines and we decided we needed to buy them, but we made it clear in the purchase agreement that we would not be contractually obligated to adhere to the plots he'd laid out. Iger continues. He knew that I was going to stand firm on the question of creative control, but it wasn't an easy thing for him to accept, and so he reluctantly agreed to be available to consult with us at our request. I promised that we would be open to his ideas, and not a hard promise to make, of course. We would be open to George Lucas's ideas. But, like the outlines, we would be under no obligation. Iger then details meeting with Lucas, screenwriter Michael Arndt, and the Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy. at Skywalker Ranch to talk about their ideas for the film. George immediately got upset as they began to describe the plot, and it dawned on him that we weren't using the stories he submitted during the negotiation, Iger recalls. The truth was, Kathy, JJ, Alan, and I had discussed the direction which the saga should go, and we all agreed that it wasn't what George had outlined. George knew we weren't contractually bound to anything, but he thought that our buying the story treatments was a tacit promise that we'd follow them, and he was disappointed that the story was being disgraced, Iger continues. I'd been so careful since our first conversation not to mislead him in any way, and I didn't think that I had now, but I could have handled it better. I should have prepared him for the meeting with JJ and Michael and told him about our conversations, that we felt it was better to go in another direction. I could have talked through this with him and possibly avoided angering him by not surprising him. Iger then admits, now, in the first meeting with him about the future of Star Wars, George felt betrayed, and while this whole process would never have been easy for him, we'd gotten off to an unnecessarily rocky start. Lucas commented on his plans for the sequels in 2018. As Lucas told it, the trilogy was going to get into the microbiotic world, exploring a world of creatures that operate differently than we do. I call them the Wills, and the Wills are the ones who actually control the universe. They feed off the Force, Lucas said. If I'd held on to the company, I could have done it, and then it would have been done. Of course, a lot of fans would have hated it, just like they did The Phantom Menace and everything. But at least the whole story from beginning to end would have been told. So Disney went in the wrong direction. Way in the wrong direction. Admittedly, George Lucas's plans weren't that good, but it seems almost intentional to make Star Wars a steaming pile of garbage that it has become. Now, I know it's not. No company wants to cut themselves off from potentially billions of dollars, more than they've made, but Disney has managed to do that. Next Friday is Triple Force Friday, where they launch all the new merchandise for The Rise of Skywalker, but for the first time ever, there won't be a midnight release all over the country. At Target, at least. Why? Well, they had them in 2015. Here's an image from the build-up to The Force Awakens. And this was only half of the aisle. Every store in America was stocked like this for Star Wars. And now, this is today. I'll save you the merchandise talk for Monday, where we scour the retail wasteland in search of Star Wars toys. And spoiler, I found something you've never seen before. The whole George Lucas betrayal thing gives a lot of credibility to the fan backlash against Disney. Every time we get called racist or a hate group or blocked on Twitter, a bombshell like this comes out and validates everything we said. Speaking of validation, our good friend Ichibaka of Disney Star Wars is Dumb has a little more insight into George Lucas's take on The Force Awakens, and it's not good for the sycophantic Star Wars shills who think Galaxy's Edge is successful. Tom Burgess of IGrewUpStarWars.com tells a story about a lunch he had with George Lucas at Skywalker Ranch. After describing the nature of the lunch with George at Skywalker Ranch, Tom states the following. George, it turns out, wasn't too keen on what they did with the sequels at this point. That's all I can tell you, because that's all we heard. He'd said that he didn't like what they did with the characters. That comes straight from George Lucas's mouth. Tom also mentions that George Lucas still owns the archives at Skywalker Ranch. So while small, this is yet another indicator of George Lucas's thoughts on the sequel trilogy. Even before Episode 7 was released, there was concern from George Lucas's public stance on the film. Again, from our friend Ichibaka, there's some insight onto this situation directly from Bob Iger's book. Even though he had issues with the film, I thought it was important for George to be at the Force Awakens premiere. He didn't want to come at first, but Kathy, with the help of George's now wife, Melody Hobson, convinced him this was the right thing to do. Almost the last thing we negotiated before the deal closed was a non-disparagement clause. I asked George to agree that he wouldn't publicly criticize any Star Wars films we made. When I brought it up with him, he said, I'm going to be a big shareholder in the Walt Disney Company. Why would I disparage you or anything you do? You have to trust me. I took him on his word. Ichibaka then goes on to posit, the sentence, I took him at his word, makes me wonder if Iger has some resentment towards George for his white slavers comment. Like I said at the beginning, I never liked The Force Awakens. I'm not saying that to try to make myself sound cool or to align myself with George Lucas, but something was off from the beginning, and that night in December of 2015 was one I will never forget. It was the night I watched Han Solo die, both literally and metaphorically. I watched logic thrown out the window for the sake of nostalgia. I saw characters inherit objects of significant importance that will never be addressed. I saw rehashes galore. I saw the Empire fight the Rebellion again. I saw the original trilogy, only this time in the form of a substandard substitute known as The Force Awakens. With Iger's book, I have to ask the question, was this all a ploy? Does Disney want to make Star Wars fail? I know that sounds stupid to say out loud, but it feels like it. Think back to Solo, where the behind-the-scenes drama was one of the big contributing factors to creating the only cinematic failure for Star Wars. The man of the hour, Bob Iger, also had thoughts on this situation, and his answers to why Star Wars is circling the drain is tiresome. Disney CEO Bob Iger says studio put out too many Star Wars movies too fast. Star Wars The Force Awakens was a pivotal moment for the franchise, not only because it launched a new trilogy, it also marked the first Star Wars release from Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. Disney purchased Lucasfilm for $4 billion in October of 2012 and relaunched the Skywalker saga with director J.J. Abrams' The Force Awakens in 2015. Since then, Disney has aggressively put out new Star Wars movies, and the company's CEO Bob Iger admits to the New York Times that the plan might have been too much. "I just think that we might have put a bit too much out in the marketplace too fast," Iger said about the response to Star Wars under Disney. "I think the storytelling capabilities from the company are endless because of the talent we have at the company, and the talent we have at the company is better than it's ever been, in part because of the influx of people from Fox." Many people in the industry felt Star Wars fatigue hurt Solo at the box office, although mixed reviews didn't help either. And as it appears, Iger agrees Disney put out too many Star Wars movies too fast, and it stymied the interest in the overall property. Ron Howard, who stepped in to direct Solo after Lucasfilm parted ways with the original directors Phil Lord and Chris Miller, told MTV's Happy Sad Confused podcast earlier this year that he believes Star Wars fatigue was indeed part of the reason Solo nosedived at the box office. Ron Howard also said that it was trolls. Those were his words, not from this article. You'd think that the gap between the films would help, but releasing this information just seems like Bob Iger chose poorly. Serious question. Is it not worth the money to make new films? I mean, nurturing Star Wars takes time. No matter your thoughts on the prequels, Lucas took his time and crafted something of value. With Disney, I just keep wondering if it's the home video rights that are worth it alone. We all know that Disney Plus is their plan for the future, and all the sheep are lining up to pre-order something that can never sell out. I'll save my thoughts for that for our streaming war video due out in a little while, but until then, just let that marinate. All in all, it's just another embarrassment for Disney and Lucasfilm. At the end of the day, it won't be Darth Vader or the Emperor or a fleet of stormtroopers or even Boba Fett himself. It was Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy and Disney that did it in, not just for our heroes, but for the women and the children. And one day, when Star Wars is worth absolutely nothing, they'll sit around and wonder, what have I done? And where did the fans go? We went somewhere else. So that's it for today, folks, and what a bombshell. George Lucas, the maker, the creator, anything, the godfather, the granddaddy, whatever you want to say about him, the man who made Star Wars possible, was disappointed in The Force Awakens. And like I said earlier, I'm not using that to validate my opinion of the film. I hated the film from the minute I saw it, didn't even know or care what George Lucas thought. I think The Force Awakens is the epitome of terrible filmmaking. Soulless, hollow, lifeless, cash grabs, and thankfully, people out there that are listening to this video and that don't even know we exist yet are smart enough to realize through diminishing returns with Star Wars that it just didn't work. And you're probably thinking to yourself, if you're one of those hate watcher people that block us on Twitter, well, The Last Jedi made $1.2 billion. Yes, $250 million less than before. And then Solo, well, it fell in the toilet. It nosedived into the toilet. So, we have seen the law of diminishing returns with Star Wars, and yes, it's too early to say the Rise of Skywalker is going to fail. Who knows? But it's not really looking good for Star Wars. It's like every day more and more of the behind-the-scenes information comes out. And now we got Kevin Feige going to make a Star Wars film. And yes, you heard that correctly. Kevin Feige is going to be involved with Lucasfilm, which we'll discuss tonight on the podcast at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you're dying to talk about that, comment in the comments section below. But you should wait till tonight when we're going to have a lot of fun, discuss it at great detail. And if there's more news that comes out, I might even drop a video later in the week. But that's it for today, folks. So thank you for watching. And as always, may the Force be with you. Wait, that's not what I say. What the fuck? Anyway, folks, go out into the world and be excellent to each other.